Welcome, friend. Follow me. We're going somewhere dark, somewhere dangerous. Most people would never dare enter the place we are going. There's no telling what horrors we'll find, what terrors we'll uncover. Don't say I didn't warn you. We might discover terrible monsters lurking there. Be careful, they could follow you out, or maybe they're already inside you. Are you afraid? Good. Now you are ready to enter the Warning Woods. A man sat sobbing in the dark on the mossy bank in front of what appeared to have been a small dock until very recently. The floating jetsam, aftermath of something terrible, slowly drifted away from the crying man, who scrambled to his feet the moment the police officer exited his vehicle. "Hold on, sir, I need you to stay back," the officer commanded. The man obeyed, but started muttering something under his breath. It sounded like he was repeating himself over and over. "Sir, what happened?" the officer asked. He shone his flashlight at the man to see him better. The moonlight barely provided enough light to make out moving shapes. "It wanted to go back. It wanted to go back. It wanted to go back," the man repeated over and over. The officer said, "Okay, we got a call about, it wanted to go back, it wanted to go back, Sir," the officer said, stepping toward the man whose eyes flashed a shark-like insanity. "Sir, where is your wife? Where's the vehicle?" "It wanted to go back, it wanted to go back, it wanted to go back, The officer pointed his flashlight at the destroyed dock, then out just a little further. His hand jumped to his radio. "I'm gonna need another unit and a supervisor here. We may need search and rescue." Jamie and Christina Parvo turned onto Soilwork Drive full of dread and regret. They were about to lay eyes on the most impulsive decision they'd ever made, either individually or as a couple. Risking their future, as well as the futures of their children Spencer and Saphira, respectively 9 and 7, the Parvos bid Jamie's recent inheritance on a foreclosed 2-bedroom lake house to use as a vacation home and rental property. Due to the deadline, they'd been unable to visit the house prior to placing the bid, but since they assumed they stood a low chance of winning the auction anyway, they submitted the best offer they could afford and waited for the call telling them someone had outbid them. They received a call just after the auction closed. No one else had bid. The bank accepted their offer. They were told to drive down at their earliest convenience to sign the paperwork and pick up the key. "No one else bid?" Christina asked the banker on the phone. She replied, No one even showed up to the open house. But don't worry, the house passed inspection, and to be honest, I think it's pretty cute. Investors are acting finicky right now, don't worry about it." Her words offered little comfort. The Parvos left their children with Christina's mother while they drove down to finalize the sale and check out their new house. On the way, they discussed how long they would need to rent it out to recoup their investment, then what they would do if they got there and found out the house was a dump. Fortunately, it seemed their concerns might have been over nothing as they pulled up the lake house's short but steep driveway. "Make sure you set the parking brake whenever you turn off the car," Jamie warned, pressing the brake down as he spoke. Still, the car rocked back slightly when he lifted his foot. Getting out, they looked down the driveway at the covered wooden boat dock across the road. "Is that ours?" Christina asked. "Sure is," Jamie replied. "Guess we'll need to get a boat, huh?" The inconveniently sloped driveway seemed to be the only negative aspect of the house as the couple walked through. The front door opened to an open concept with a spacious living room and modern kitchen. One of the bedrooms had a half bathroom attached, and the other was easily big enough for 2 beds. The kids probably wouldn't be willing to share a room for more than another year or 2, but one could always sleep in the living room whenever the family spent a weekend there. "I guess this must be the garage," Jamie said as he opened a side door near the kitchen. Indeed, the door opened to a dark, musty, single-car garage. Jamie only barely noticed a quick movement at the edge of the light cast from the kitchen onto the garage's far wall. Though he couldn't be sure and quickly told himself he'd imagined it, the shadow looked like that of a tall man. He could still see his own shadow cast across the garage. The other shadow had not belonged to him. He whipped his head around to see where his wife was standing, if she could have cast the second shadow. But she was investigating the stove too far away. Jamie slammed the door shut. "Something wrong?" Christina whispered, instantly alert. Jamie sucked the inside of his left cheek in and stared down at his hand clamped around the doorknob. He raised a finger to Christina and leaned into the door, both to hold it shut and to listen through it. He didn't hear any noises in the garage. "Jamie, what's happening?" Christina demanded. Jamie took his phone out of his pocket and turned on the flashlight. He threw open the door again and stuck his phone out, lighting the garage faintly, but enough to show anyone lurking in the shadows. Unless they were crouched behind the weather-beaten fishing boat taking up the entire middle. Jamie crouched under the boat to shine his light around, looking for anyone hiding beneath or behind the boat. Finding no one, he stood. "All clear," he said. "Sorry, I just really thought I saw someone move in here when I opened the door." Christina said, "Spooky." Then, "They just left all this stuff?" Poking at a life vest on the floor with the toe of his shoe, Jamie said, "I guess so." The garage was full of miscellaneous items, all dusty and covered with spider webs and dead insects. In one corner rested some old fishing poles with no reels. In the corner opposite the poles, a collection of rusty rakes and shovels leaned. A dank odor clouded the garage and wafted into the kitchen while Jamie and Christina stood in the open doorway. Jamie wondered if the open bags of kitty litter lined up next to the door had anything to do with it. "Is the boat a bonus, or is somebody going to come pick it up later?" Christina asked. "I don't know, the bank didn't mention it," said Jamie. "I kind of hope someone's coming to get it. Doesn't look very seaworthy to me. Plus, it'd be nice to be able to put the car in here. It's much flatter than the driveway." Christina slipped between him and the doorway to enter the musty garage. She wrinkled her nose as she approached the boat. She walked along its side, running her fingertips along the gunwale. Much of the paint along the boat's sides had been stripped off, unintentionally by the looks of it. It looked like it had been left out during a tornado, maybe more than once. What color remained still looked dark and rich, not old and sun-faded. The sparse paint informed the Parvos the boat used to be a rich, dark red color, almost burgundy. Paint chips on the ground added to their confusion. It was like the boat was shedding, coming apart as it sat still in the garage. "Oh God, Jamie!" Christina gasped, launching herself back into the kitchen. What? Jamie replied, catching her, then taking her place by the boat's side. Based on her reaction, he expected to find a live snake coiled inside the boat. What he immediately noticed was hairy, though, and matted with dried blood. A reeking mass of massacred rats lay clustered together in a circle roughly the size of a dinner plate on the boat's floor. When he shone his flashlight on them, Jamie could see horrific marks of violence on their bodies. Some still had their teeth sunk into others. The rats, it seemed, had torn each other up in some kind of rabid frenzy. Then, inexplicably, they'd all either laid down together or been placed there after death. But who would have done that? Adding to the strangeness, Jamie noticed the rats were predictably covered in hundreds of black flies, but the expected buzzing did not accompany them. The flies all looked sticky with the rats' blood, as if they had burrowed in and drowned in it. The rancid mass of horror was too much for Jamie to be near for long. After a few seconds, he lowered his light and retreated to the kitchen, closing the garage door behind himself. Feeling defiled, he took a few steps away from Christina. He felt like he shouldn't even look at her. Staring at the bottom of the garage door, he said, "We, can deal with that later. That's..." That's going to be a nasty job. You'll take care of it before the kids come though, right? She asked. Anger flashed behind Jamie's eyes, which shot up to meet Christina's. He wasn't sure exactly what made him angry. Was it the automatic expectation that the rotten mess was his job, or that she felt the need to ask? Of course he would get rid of the grotesque biohazard in the garage before their children arrived. He'd planned on making it his responsibility, but he didn't think it was fair of her to dump it on him without so much as an offer to help, even just as a formality. You okay? Christina asked. The oblivious concern behind her eyes angered Jamie further, but the more rational side of his brain took over and banished the burning feelings from his mind. Just grossed out, he replied. Maybe stepping outside for a bit will help. Let's go check out the deck. Although they could have looked at it on their way in, the Parvos had wordlessly agreed to save the front deck for last. The bottom of the sun touched the tops of the trees across the lake as they stepped through the glass sliding door, so the timing could not have been better for them to scope out their new lakeside view. Hey look, they left something besides that junk in the garage, Christina said as she ran her fingers along the back of one of 4 wooden lounging chairs circled around the built-in fire pit in the center of the deck. And no rats, Jamie replied. A silence encased them. They didn't know it, but both of them started imagining sitting around the fire with their kids roasting hot dogs and s'mores. Christina finally asked, Think they'll like it? Jamie sighed through his nose. For a short stay, absolutely. I'm not sure they'll put up with more than a couple of weeks here and there, though. He smacked at something crawling up his leg. He couldn't tell what it was when he lifted its smeared remains to Christina's eye level and said, Exhibit A. This will be good for them, though. In what way? Christina asked. I don't know. I became a dad and stuff like that just started coming out of my mouth. Christina laughed. I think I know what you mean. She wrapped an arm around his waist and rested her head on his shoulder. They froze that way, watching the sun go down. Hey, new neighbors, a high voice with a southern drawl called from above. Jamie and Christina searched for it, finally seeing a 9 or 10-year-old boy leaning over the rail on the much more elevated deck of the house to their left. His house sat much higher on the hill, putting him at least 6 feet above them on his perch. Well, hey, Jamie replied, waving up at the kid. You guys have kids? He asked. Jamie asked, Why, do you live here? Sometimes, the boy replied. This used to be our vacation home until Mom and Dad split. Really sucks. Now I have to go live in town with my mom 2 weeks a month. There's nowhere even to fish. How's the fishing here? Jamie asked. He was never much of a fisherman, but he could envision picking up the sport, especially if they decided to salvage the boat in the garage. It's real good, said the boy. Especially over there around... He gasped inwardly and looked at the couple wide-eyed. Nearly whispering, he asked, You ever go magnet fishing? Christina looked at Jamie, who shrugged. She said, We don't even know what that is. The boy looked dismayed and backed off of the deck railing slightly. He said, It's this thing the people who used to live here took me out to do. They had this heavy magnet on a long rope and a pole, and they'd throw it off of the boat, and it would drag all over the bottom of the lake, and sometimes the rope would get tight, and that's when you know you really got something because only metal stuff sticks to the magnet. So that means you found something cool, and you can drag it up to the boat to see what it is. We found a car door once, a whole car door. Christian's the guy who used to live at your house? Christian said it might have come off a car somebody drove in the lake on accident once. Can you believe that? Somebody drove their car in the lake and the door fell off? Jamie smirked at Christina before shrugging at the kid, saying, Nope, that's pretty crazy. Christina said, Hey, what else can you tell us about the people who lived here? What were they like, if you don't mind me asking? A look of nostalgia crossed the boy's face, and he looked toward the lake. Christian and Sarah were the coolest people I ever met. They always used to take me out with them when Mom and Dad were fighting. Sometimes Christian let me play video games with him. They didn't have any kids. Oh yeah, do you have kids? 2, Jamie answered this time. Their names are Spencer and Saphira, Christina added. Oh, like Sapphire. That's pretty cool, the boy said. What are your names?" "I'm Jamie, and this is Christina. What's yours?" "I'm Ben. Dad calls me Benji, but I hate it. It's short for Benjamin." "Hey, wait, Christina sounds a lot like Christian. That's kind of funny because the guy who used to live here was named Christian." "Yeah," Christina replied, forcing a faint laugh. The sunset looked serene, and she was ready to be done talking to this child. He was also making her miss her own kids. She wished it was one of them bothering her instead. Fortunately, she was saved by the sound of a sliding door opening above. "Benji, who are you talking to out here?" a deep voice boomed. "Our new neighbors, Dad. Jamie and Christina." A mule of a man appeared at the deck rail. From the parvo's angle, his handlebar mustache seemed to anchor him to the rail like a gigantic staple as he looked down upon them. "Well, hello there. Jamie and Christina..." "Parvo," Jamie filled in. "Uh-huh. Nice to meet you. Sorry about my boy. He'll talk the ear off of anyone. Benji, why don't you say goodnight and head inside?" "Good night," Ben said with a sad wave. "See you around," Jamie called after him. His father smiled. "I go by Arnie, so just holler at me if you need anything. You folks moving in tonight or just scoping the place out?" Jamie said, "I thought we'd spend the night here, but we've got a ways to go before we're ready to move in." Arnie nodded, then said, "You know, I have to ask. Do you know about the couple you bought this from?" Christina shook her head. Jamie said, "We actually bought it from the bank. It was foreclosed on." "Figures," said Arnie. Then, after taking a moment to think, he said, "I suppose their story can wait. Not that anybody can tell you exactly what happened anyway." "Oh, real quick," Jamie cut in. "I don't suppose you'd know, but did they mean to leave the garage full? I mean, even their boat is in there." "Oh, it is it?" Arnie asked, leaning back as if taking in the shocking news. When he leaned forward again, he said, "Well, I thought the movers were in and out pretty quick. Yeah, they didn't seem to want to stick around here too long." His face suddenly brightened and he forced a laugh. "But I think I've said enough. Don't mean to scare you good folks off." "Oh, don't worry. We're in this thing whether we like it or not," Jamie replied. Christina clarified, "Nobody else was interested at all. It seems weird. It's such a nice house and such a pretty spot. Wait, do you think there's a reason the movers were in such a hurry?" Arnie shrugged. "Guess y'all were meant to have it. Well, good night." He ignored the last part of her question. "Good night," Jamie and Christina replied in unison. They shared a bewildered look and headed inside. Back in the living room, Christina asked Jamie to get their air mattress out of the car so she could start blowing it up. She needed to pee. While sitting on the toilet, she Googled their new home's address to see if she could learn anything about its history. The longer she spent at the house, the more difficult it became for her to accept that no one else had placed a bid on it. At the price they paid, people should have been swarming to acquire the property. A cursory search of the address didn't turn up anything beyond the ended foreclosure listing, and before she could search any deeper, she heard the whiny air compressor turn on in the next room over. Leaving the bathroom, Christina paused. She could hear Jamie blowing up the air mattress in the bedroom, but she thought she saw someone else on the other side of the glass sliding door, standing on the deck. However, the living room's bright reflection on the glass made it hard to discern. She could feel someone watching her, though, and the longer she stared, the more certain she felt that a tall figure was hiding behind the reflection. "Jamie?" she called, calm but with a slight edge to her voice to get his attention. The air compressor shut off and Jamie appeared in the bedroom doorway. "What?" "Do you see somebody out there?" She didn't point but nodded slightly toward the door. Jamie scrunched up his face and squinted his eyes. Christina noticed they'd left the sliding door unlocked, and her breath caught in her throat. "Hang on," Jamie said as he looked along the unfamiliar walls for the light switch. He flipped it off the moment he found it. The glass became clear, and no one stood outside. Christina finally unfroze to rush across the living room and lock the door. "You okay?" Jamie asked. Christina whipped around, sensing the same eyes upon her she'd felt through the glass door now behind her, and she saw them. Glinting in the dark bathroom behind Jamie, she saw two orbs roughly 6 feet in the air, embedded in the faint shape of a tall figure, darker than the shadows surrounding it. "Jamie!" she screamed. She pointed directly into the bathroom, a room with no way out other than the door. Yet when Jamie reached in and turned on the light, no one was standing inside. Christina's heart felt like she'd just run 5 miles. Her skin felt tacky and hot. Jamie only made her feel worse by saying, "It's a new house. Unfamiliar places can be a little spooky." It was the same word she'd used earlier when he thought he'd seen someone move in the garage. Had he seen his figure as clearly as she just had? She couldn't help but question whether they needed to take these sightings more seriously, but when she broached the subject after Jamie resumed blowing up the air mattress, he didn't want to hear it. "Look, there's just no way anyone could have gotten into or out of the bathroom without us seeing them. As for the garage, sure, maybe that's more plausible, but you were out there too. Did you see anybody? No. We're both just tired and maybe a little anxious about buying this place, and maybe a little anxious?" Christina seethed. "Jamie, what were we thinking? As soon as we heard no one else bid, we should have pulled out." "Why?" "Well, because we're not investors. We don't know how to assess properties or whatever. If all the pros looked at this place and passed, don't you think we might have missed something?" "Like what? Look around. What did we miss, Christina? This place is perfect." She hated it when he said her name that way, like it was an insult or a curse. "I don't know, Jamie. That's the entire point." "We should call the kids," Jamie replied. "Don't try to avoid this." "Avoid what? Talking about the ghost you're seeing around the house?" Christina pulled at her bangs and screamed, "You saw it too!" Jamie stood up. The air compressor's hose fell off the mattress and started spewing air into the room with a constant hiss. Over the noise, Jamie yelled, "I don't know what I saw. Now are you going to help me get this bed ready, or are you going to keep acting crazy?" She stepped forward. She wanted to hit him. She thought she was going to hit him, but she suppressed the impulse. Neither of them had ever laid a hand on each other during a fight, but the impulse started creeping around her self-control. Jamie had already returned his attention to attaching the air compressor hose. Christina raised her hand, then lowered it. Her eyebrows came together as she wondered, "What am I doing?" She looked down at her hand. It almost didn't look familiar. "Are we done?" Jamie asked. Christina's teeth clicked together in her skull. She didn't hit him. She shoved him. She threw her weight at him, knocking him onto the half-inflated mattress and causing the hose to shoot out of the nozzle once more. Jamie made a startled, angry noise she'd never heard before swearing at her. "Get back here!" he screamed, floundering on the vinyl cloud, trying to get up. But she was already out of the bedroom. She slammed the door behind her. Jamie climbed to his feet a few seconds later. He reached for the doorknob but stopped with his hand clasped around it. Christina had just pushed him over. She'd never touched him like that before. He'd never felt her fury that way. And over what? A ghost? No, he thought. I'd better let her settle down a little before I go after her. He shut off the air compressor so he could listen to the noises Christina made through the bedroom door, listening to make sure she didn't start breaking things or hurting herself. Jamie heard her pacing back and forth. He told himself he would open the door whenever she settled into one place. That would likely mean she'd calmed down at least a little. But when her pacing stopped, he also heard a door open. Not familiar enough with the sounds of the house yet, he mistook the squealing as coming from the front door. However, when he opened the bedroom door, he saw it was really the garage door she had opened. Rotten air, heavy with the stench of the dead rats, pooled out into the kitchen. "Christina?" Jamie called. "Christina, what are you doing in there?" He heard only the clattering of metal and a dry whack from something wooden striking the floor. He heard scuffing feet and thick wooden groans. He could have taken 5 steps and been able to see into the garage, but a submerged survival instinct anchored him in place. He called her name again and asked her to come out. "Come on, Christina, you're stinking up the kitchen," he pleaded. Then Christina appeared, gripping a shovel, blade flat out in front of her. On the shovel, she carried the rats, shredded, rotting, amalgamated into one mass of putrid flesh and hollowed bones. "Take that outside," Jamie screamed, stumbling toward the sliding door. He yanked it open just before Christina would have crashed through it with the tip of the shovel blade. "What is wrong with you?" he demanded. Christina carried the rat pie to the edge of the deck, turned over the shovel, and dropped it down the hill. The rats broke apart on impact, some more than others. Christina turned around. She held the shovel, blade up, like a walking stick in front of her. She looked at Jamie the same way she looked at their children and scolded him. "You weren't fixing it, so I did. You didn't give me the chance to. You could have told me it was bothering you and I would have taken care of it right away." "Oh, like it wasn't bothering you?" she fired back. Jamie said, "It grossed me out, but I figured I could take care of it tomorrow. I mean, as long as they were gone before the kids came, I figured they were making me feel sick," Christina mumbled, sounding a bit more like her usual self. She practically whispered, "I could smell them all the time, even on the deck while we were talking to that kid." Jamie said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you could..." Christina broke in again. "I could hear flies buzzing around them. I could hear them landing on their sticky guts and dying." "Okay, Christina, that's plenty. I get the picture. Lesson learned." She gripped his arm and he twisted it to turn her toward him, his anger primed to explode. But when their eyes met, he saw not anger in her shimmering eyes, but fear. A tear cut down her cheek. She whimpered, "Why can I still hear them, Jamie?" Jamie finished blowing up the air mattress to give Christina somewhere to lay down. He turned on the overhead fan in hopes the noise would soothe her. Without telling her, he then went into the garage. This time he bothered to find the light switch. The light flickered twice, then went out. He pulled out his phone again and once more turned on its flashlight. He approached the boat hesitantly. He just wanted to make sure Christina had cleaned off all the dead rats and left nothing behind. The sight, or thought of them, maybe the combination, had clearly disturbed her much more than he'd initially realized or ever really thought it could. He intended to scrub every last trace of the mess, at least in the garage. He figured he would probably need to get up early to clear the dead rats out of the front yard before Christina woke up. He'd just toss them off the dock into the lake. Something in the water would surely enjoy them. He looked over the dark patch on the boat's floor where the rats had torn each other up. The wood was stained reddish-brown, but it didn't look like Christina had left anything solid behind. With the rats out of the way, Jamie realized they'd been piled on top of a square hatch in the floor. It was like they'd been fighting to get inside. Curious, he picked up a rake that had fallen to the floor. He inserted the rake's handle into the metal loop at the top of the hatch and lifted. Responsibility for the garage's slimy stench did not lie entirely upon the rats. Whatever waited inside that floor hatch emitted a gaseous odor which caused Jamie to drop it shut again and spin away in disgust. The smell implanted the image of dead fish washed up on a muddy stream bed. He barely managed to keep the trail mix he'd eaten for dinner down. Once he recovered, he took a deep breath, pulled his shirt over his mouth and nose, and climbed onto the boat. It felt more stable than it looked. He still didn't think he would trust it on the water, but at least it supported his weight. He'd left the rake behind and now found it out of reach. With great anxiety, he drew in and held a deep breath, then opened the hatch with his bare hand. Timed by his already aching lungs, he hurried to shine his light inside. Gratitude washed over him when he saw what waited below was not another dead creature. It looked like a metal ornament of some sort. Rows of overlapping crescent moons pointing outward made up the majority of the algae-coated circle. Jamie guessed the algae spores may have caused the horrendous stench. He didn't understand how it was growing down there, away from the water though. The interior of the hatch looked perfectly dry to the point of cracking. It was like the algae existed symbiotically with the metal symbol, which should not have made sense, but Jamie detected an unsettling energy resonating from it. It made him nervous and uncomfortable, and something deep within himself felt repelled by it, pushed away like the matching end of a magnet. Perhaps some of this feeling he could attribute to the face in the center of the circle, the only portion which the algae left untouched. The eyes were large and hollow like a skull, and its nose resembled a wild boar's, complete with two tusks rising upward in the corners of its grinning mouth. From the top of its head, two horns curved downward. The face could not be mistaken as anything but evil. Something in the corner of the garage fell and clattered on the ground, startling Jamie into dropping the hatch and popping his head out of his shirt. He flashed his light in the corner and saw the second shovel had fallen over. He told himself he disturbed it when he grabbed the rake. He noticed another tool as well, something he and Christina had overlooked their first time in the garage. A long rod with rope tied to the end. Jamie followed the rope down to the floor where it spooled around a small metal puck, a magnet. He recalled Ben telling them how the previous owners used to take him magnet fishing. Was the object inside the boat hatch something they'd drudged up from the depths of the lake? How had it gotten there? Where did it come from? Whatever the answer, he didn't want the symbol in the house, not even in the garage. But that was a problem to solve under daylight. He felt too unsettled to mess with it in the darkness. On his way back to the bedroom, Jamie stared through the glass sliding door at the moonlight reflecting off the still lake. It looked so serene. He wished he could start a fire on the deck and just stay out there all night staring at the water. He could, he supposed, but that would surely upset Christina, and that seemed like an awful idea. They could have been out there together. What had come between them? The stress of purchasing the house? Her anxiety from being so far from the kids? Or could the violence and all of her harsh words, okay, they'd both exchanged some nastiness, all be blamed on the dead rats in the garage? Or perhaps the blame lied with that sinister symbol hidden inside the boat. What was that thing? Why was it in? Jamie's breath stopped blooming on the glass. When it evaporated, he did not replace it. He saw in the kitchen's reflection on the glass a tall black figure similar to what Christina described seeing in the bathroom. It was standing near the garage door, and though he could not see any of its features, he felt it staring into him. He could have opened the door right then and slipped outside. That's what his base mind told him to do, but he wouldn't leave Christina alone. With one hand on the door handle in case retreat became necessary, Jamie twisted around to face the figure in the kitchen. By the time his eyes focused on the garage door, however, the figure was gone. He looked back at the reflection, fully expecting to see the tall form still there, perhaps looming even closer now. But he only saw the empty kitchen reflected on the door now. Maybe, he thought, it really was just stress causing these hallucinations. He made sure the garage door was locked as well as the front door and sliding door. Then he locked the bedroom door before lying down beside his comatose wife and, eventually, falling asleep. He woke to a low, violent cracking sound, followed by an enormous splash. At first, his waking reality didn't seem real. It felt like some trailing remnant of a dream he was having. Much like the Shadow Man, he thought the splash could be a concoction of his stressed-out mind. Without opening his eyes, he rolled over and slid a hand toward Christina. The comfort of her warmth often aided him back to sleep on restless nights. But Christina wasn't there. Jamie shoved himself off the air mattress and turned on the light. The bedroom door was still closed, still locked, but Christina was nowhere in sight. She could have turned the lock on the inside knob before shutting the door, but why? Why would she lock herself out of her own bedroom in the middle of the night? Jamie didn't bother searching inside the house. Christina's odd behavior and the giant splash twisted together into one thought which he struggled to accept. The story of what Christina had done came together in pieces. Their car missing from the driveway, the tilt-up garage door being open, the weathered boat absent from its toppled cinder block mounts. Then, down at the water, their dock smashed, parts of it sinking into the still rippling water, others floating outward. Bubbles geysered up to the surface where the Parvos' car was slowly sinking, just beyond the remnants of the dock. The end of a rope writhed like a snake in the bubbles trailing behind the car. All of this Jamie could barely see in the darkness, but slowly took in as he stood on the bank, heart pounding, throat swollen shut. And there was Christina, out on the lake, sitting in the back of that weathered boat, the one they'd both claimed they would not trust on the water. At the boat's helm stood another person, a tall, black shadow. It faced away from Christina, and the boat, with no motor, no paddles, followed a course set by his gaze. They were already far out of Jamie's reach, and already he could tell they were starting to sink. He screamed Christina's name. She did not turn back to him, but kept staring ahead in the same direction as the Shadow Man. Her end of the boat was sinking faster than his. She must have already been waist deep as she sat calmly, awaiting her fate. "Christina, wake up!" Jamie screamed. Again, no reaction. She and the Shadow Man continued floating away. "What's going on?" a voice boomed from above. Jamie turned around. He could barely make out Arnie standing at the rail of his high deck. Jamie pointed out at the boat and pleaded, "Call for help. It's my wife. Something's wrong with her and she's going to drown." Arnie slowly backed away, a stupefied look slackening his face. He said not a word until he reached his door, where he said, "I'll call 911, then disappeared inside. He did not emerge again until the following morning when the sun shone safely down upon the lake. Jamie could barely tell Christina was in a boat anymore. Her shoulders were level with the top of the water. The Shadow Man had disappeared. In a few seconds, his wife would disappear too. She surprised him by standing. Hope flared in Jamie's chest and he called to her, beckoning her to swim back to shore. He tried to swim out to her, but in the dark he could not see where the jagged pieces of dock blocked his path. They slowed him on his way out, but he kept calling for her to swim towards him. She could make it. She was strong enough. She just needed to wake up from her trance. Even after she stood up on the sunken boat, Christina paid no attention to Jamie. She stooped, reaching into the water, and stood back up, holding something which Jamie could not see directly, but intuitively recognized. Christina raised the reeking metal symbol above her head until it aligned with the moon. She turned her face up toward it and stared in reverent worship as she sank lower and lower. She continued to hold it high even as her head vanished beneath the surface. Her hands clasping the evil symbol were the last part of Christina Jamie saw until late the following day when a search and rescue dive team recovered her blue body. The symbol that dragged her down to the depths of the lake could not be found. Jamie never brought his children to the lake house. He let it sit empty until he found a rental company willing to give him a lowball offer to take it off his hands. The deal left him financially ruined in the wake of his wife's untimely death, but Jamie saw no other way out. He remains frightened to this day that the symbol at the bottom of the lake will somehow find its way back to him and claim him. He still thinks he sees dark figures in corners sometimes, although they never stay long enough for him to be certain. He learned what happened to the couple who owned the house before them. In a case that defied logic and reason, they strangled each other to death. They were found in the garage, dead in the very boat Christina rowed to her death, with their hands clenched around each other's throats. By the time they were discovered, rats had already begun to chew through their flesh. No stories written about the bizarre tragedy included the couple's address, but the locals knew where they had lived when it happened. Word spread when their house went up for sale. It just didn't reach Jamie or Christina Parvo. Jamie tries to take comfort in the fact the evil symbol has returned to the depths of the lake, but questions how long will it be until someone comes along and drags it back. He wonders if such a day will happen by coincidence, or if that thing intended to surface and will do so again.
You made it out. Congratulations. If you enjoyed the story, please rate, like, review, or subscribe. For ad-free episodes and behind-the-scenes episodes I call Into the Woods, become a patron with the link in the description. You can also support the show by buying merch. That link is also in the description below. To stay up to date, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at The Warning Woods. And when you feel ready, meet me here for another journey into the Warning Woods. Thank you for listening.